and welcome to Healthy at Home. Today we are going to be talking about shoulder health, and if you keep hurting your shoulder and why do you keep hurting your shoulder, or how can you keep from hurting your shoulder. We're going to learn about shoulder mechanics and exercises that help keep them healthy. My name is Paige Corley, and I'm a health educator with the health promotion team at Salt Lake County Aging and Adult Services. And I'm certified in the three different evidence-based classes that I'm in charge of here at the county. And those are Enhanced Fitness, Walk with Ease, and the Arthritis Foundation Exercise Program. I got my master's in kinesiology in 2017 and hold a few professional certifications. And I've been in the fitness biz since 1995, so a long time. I love working with older adults. I love doing art. I love spending time with my husband and my two dogs. So that's a little bit about me. Now let's talk about the shoulder. So we're going to start with just the anatomy of the shoulder. And I have three different pictures here. You notice the one on the top left kind of shows that it's a ball and socket joint. That means that you kind of have the head of one of the bones that's round and it fits into a concave part of another bone, and it just works in there, which means that it has a pretty good range of motion. It's a fairly unstable joint, which means that it has lots of range of motion, but also means that it's ripe with problems. But you can kind of see that the shoulder, the head of the humerus fits into the little concave area of the scapula. And that's all attached to the clavicle or the collarbone. And you can kind of see that the scapula isn't, well, we'll see in future slides that there are a variety of muscles that attach the humerus to the scapula, and then the scapula is attached only through muscle. It's not attached via tendon or ligament to the spine. So it's free floating, and it moves in lots and lots of different directions, and that's wonderful. That's also part of the problem. You can see on this bottom picture that there is a muscle that runs underneath the corticoromial ligament, which attaches kind of lengthways across our shoulder, and that muscle runs underneath that ligament and underneath the clavicle, which means if we are just a little bit out of alignment, that muscle is going to rub against the bone. And that's why it's just so easy to have irritation in the shoulder joint. All right. It's not the best news, but the good news is with the right body mechanics and focus on movement, we can keep ourselves from injuring that part of our body. So let's talk about the trapezius here and the different muscles of the back. A ton of muscles on the back, and some of them are in charge of holding the scapula in place. Some of them are in charge of moving our arm, our femur. Some are in charge of stabilizing our shoulder blades. There's just moving our head around. There's just so many muscles back there, and the ones that I want you to really kind of take note of are these rhomboid muscles. It's on the right hand side of the picture, and they kind of run from the top of the thoracic spine, and they travel downward and attach to the scapula. And those rhomboid muscles have a lot to do with the motion in our scapula, so our shoulder blade. And they have a lot to do with stabilization of that shoulder blade. So they're ones that I talk about a lot because they have a lot to do with posture. And of course, I'm going to talk a lot about posture today and how posture can really help with our shoulder health. So notice where those rhomboids are. If you've never heard of the rhomboid and you're interested, go ahead and Google them, look them up. There's so many great videos on YouTube these days that you can really get a good 3D picture of the muscles and how they're attached on the body, so you can really see how they're supposed to be moving. You can also see that there's a muscle that runs from kind of the very top of the scapula up into the cervical region. So imagine if that muscle is tight and how much that's going to elevate the shoulder blade. So again, we're really that when we're talking about the muscles, what their length tension relationship in relation to each other, and we're going to talk about that more, um, has a lot to do with how the shoulder blades settle on our back. And again, posture is going to have a lot to do with that. So lots of muscles in the back that affect our shoulders. And then there's the muscles of the rotator cuff. And many of you probably know about the rotator cuff because you injured your rotator cuff. You can see that I have two pictures here. The one on the left is an anterior view of the shoulder blade, and the one on the right is a posterior view. So the anterior view is actually very, very deep inside the body, right? So it's kind of behind your ribs. Look at all those muscles that are on that scapula, on the inside of the scapula, the part that's closest to the inside of your body. Really, really, really deep muscles. And then on the right-hand side, you have the posterior view, which is the view that's going to be closest to your skin, closest to the actual back of your body. And you can see how many muscles are on that side that really control that. These have a lot to do with stabilizing the head of the humerus as you move your arm around, and stabilizing the shoulder blade. So as you move your arm around, your shoulder blade isn't all loosey goosey back there. And you can see that supraspinatus muscle that runs underneath the clavicle, the one that I talked about, that's so easy to rub up against if you have even the littlest bit of dysfunction in the shoulder blade. Obviously, this is a lot to take in. I really am just showing you this just so you get that idea of, wow, there's a lot of stuff going on in the back. A whole bunch of stuff, a whole bunch of muscles, a lot of different bones, and all in all, it is a relatively unstable ball and socket joint. So I also want to look at the muscles of the chest. I think many of us are aware of like the pec major, which is the big breast muscle. Of course, it's more visible on men usually. With women, you know, the breast usually covers that pec major muscle, but not always. Um, and you can also, what I really wanted to point out here was the pec minor muscle. So if you look on the right-hand side of this picture that's on the screen, you see that there's these three little muscles that go from, they attach to part of the scapula, to the more superficial part of the scapula, not superficial, sorry, the deeper part of the scapula, and they run down and attach actually onto our ribs. And so you can imagine if these muscles are tight, then what we get is a rounded shoulder. It actually pulls the scapula up and over the shoulder. And most of us have really tight pec minor muscles because we sit at the computer, we sit on our cars, we sit in the couch, and it just naturally pushes our shoulders forward. And those muscles get really, really tight. And that's a big cause of posture that is not good. You know, it causes us to be out of our neutral spine. It causes those shoulder blades to be out of their functional position. And when we're out of the functional position, remember, then all of a sudden we have that muscle that runs underneath the clavicle that can get rubbed, and we have a lot of dysfunction that goes on with the shoulder blades. So if you don't know about the pec minors, this is again another opportunity for you to Google them, watch some videos on them. There's wonderful ones on YouTube, and they'll really show you where they originate and where they attach, and how if they get tight, they really can affect the movement of the arm. Remember, we had that ball and socket, so you get a little bit off, and that ball of the humerus is not going to rotate in the attachment or that concave part of the scapula in the way that it was meant to. So next we have the scapula, and I just wanted to go over all the different motions that the scapula is capable of. We have elevation, that's where we shrug our shoulders up. So imagine again, if those muscles that run from your clavicle to your cervical spine are tight, you're going to kind of be in a perpetual shrug position, right? Usually that's a tight muscle that we need to loosen. We can also depress our shoulder blades, and that means pull them down on our back. And this is a motion that many of us don't We're just not aware that that's something that we need to be practicing or need to be working into our exercise routines, uh, pulling those shoulder blades down. And you'll see that depression is a part of having a neutral spine. Pulling those shoulder blades down naturally lifts our chest, which is going to stretch those pec minors. Do you see how all of a sudden one thing affects another? It's a big, what's it called, a domino effect, right? We have adduction or retraction, which means pulling the shoulder blades together. And a lot of people think that by doing adduction, pulling the shoulder blades together, that all of a sudden you're in a neutral spine. That's not necessarily the truth. We don't want the shoulder blades to be pulled together. We want them to be set in a nice neutral position. And the thing that really helps our posture is to practice that depression so that we can pull our chest up. Then we also have abduction, and that's when the shoulder blades come apart. So if you can imagine the pec minors being tight, what's going to happen? That adduction, the shoulder blades are going to come apart and elevate on our shoulders, which is not what we want. When we take our arms overhead, you can see all this motion that's going on with the upward rotation. Not only are those shoulder blades going away from each other at the very bottom, so they're abducting, abduction away from each other, but there's also some elevation that's going on as well. And so there are so many muscles involved in that upward rotation and taking your arms overhead. A movement that many of us just take for granted, putting our arms overhead, we just do it. But there's so much, there's a symphony of muscular actions that need to occur for that to happen. And if you're out of alignment and you do an overhead motion repetitively, which we just do in life, that's where we start to have that irritation of a bone rubbing up against a muscle or the ball and socket joint not being in that ideal position, therefore causing that dysfunctional movement, which can cause irritation in the joint, bursitis, that kind of thing. We also have downward rotation, which is basically just coming back, bringing your arms back down and coming back into our neutral spine. So I love looking at this picture because it reminds me that we really want to be with our shoulder blades not pulled together. We don't want them pulled apart. We don't want them up, and we don't necessarily want them all the way down. We want them right in the middle. The best way to do that is to make sure that we have a nice neutral spine, especially in our cervical or chest area. So again, talking about the shoulder motions, you can see that I have another picture of the overhead reach. And not only is the serratus anterior, that's the muscle that they have as SA on the far right-hand side of the picture, that's contracting to pull the bottom part of the scapula away from the midline. The lower trap, which is attached to more of the upper part of the scapula, is pulling down, not to pull the shoulder blade down, but to stabilize it so that it stays where it's at while the bottom part of the scapula rotates upward. And then you have the upper trap, which is actually pulling that lateral part of the scapula up to allow for that femur, for the arm, the humerus, to get as high above your head as possible. So it's a lot of muscles that are contracting, getting shorter, muscles that are creating a stability, which isn't necessarily a shortening or lengthening of the muscle, but making it so that one part of the shoulder blade stays where it's supposed to be. So obviously, there's a ton of things going on here, and we're not conscious of this. You know, it's not like I'm thinking, okay, serratus anterior, I want you to contract, and you know, that's not happening. It's just our bodies, our brains are pre-programmed, right, to do this stuff. And the best thing we can do for our brain and our body is make sure that we're in the best alignment possible and that those muscles that need to contract and stabilize are healthy and at the proper length tension relationship. And I'm going to talk more about that length tension relationship, don't worry. All right, and next, ways to affect your shoulder health. So here we got health, we have Superman. And I use a picture of Superman because that stance is a great way to find neutral spine. You know, another one is to just stand with your palms forward, kind of in an anatomical position. But this way, your shoulder blades are in a very good position on your back. Your chest is lifted. you've gotten any sort of roundness in your back taken care of, your head isn't forward, it's pulled back, belly is pulled in. It's a very empowering position, and really it's great for our posture. So sometimes I'll tell clients, if you're wanting to affect your posture, um, slowly, because if you're out of alignment, it's going to take a little while to get back into alignment. Practice this Superman stance 1 minute for every hour you're awake. It's as simple as that. And then maybe in another month, do 2 minutes for every hour you're awake. And then eventually you're going to get to where standing like that doesn't seem like you have to do it on purpose. It just becomes how you stand. So it's something to work into your daily routine. So let's talk about that length tension relationship and how our posture affects um, our shoulder health. This is a big one, and it's so easy. You don't even have to know a lot about anatomy or physiology or the bones or muscles or anything to affect this. But you can see on the picture on the left-hand side, um, this is a very typical posture position. The forward head, the rounded shoulders, the kind of sunken in chest. And you can kind of see that this relationship lends itself to a muscular imbalance. So in this, we have tight muscles in our upper neck from holding that head forward, trying not to let it fall even more forward. Our pecs are tight from the rounded shoulders. And our back, those rhomboids and those lower traps, are weakened because they're in a lengthened position, as are the neck muscles. So we don't want our muscles overly lengthened or overly tightened. We want them just perfect so they have really good movement within that contraction phase. The more we stand like this, the more those muscles adapt to this position. All of a sudden, we have muscles that are so tight they can't really eccentrically contract, which means lengthen, or we have muscles that are so lengthened out that they've lost their ability to do the concentric contraction, which is the shortening. And our bodies are wonderful. They'll adapt to what we tell them to do. So if year after year after year you stand in this posture, your muscles are going to adapt to this posture. So again, it takes a while to get out of this posture. You see, that's kind of the opposite of the Superman stance, right? Superman, chin is neutral, chest is lifted, right? And you can see it's the same picture on the right-hand side. But I really like sometimes the arrow that kind of shows, everything's rounded forward, and we don't want that. We want things to be lifting up, lift up, counteract gravity, right? Counteract it by really lifting that chest, pulling those shoulder blades down, pulling the chin in, pulling the belly in, opening the chest. Here we are again with these pictures. They're just a little bit closer up. And I wanted to tell you that I learned about this when I was getting my master's. And it really struck a chord with me. It really made sense. All of a sudden, it was that aha moment where you're like, oh, that makes total sense. And this is called the upper crossed syndrome. And it is by a physical therapist named Vladimir Janda. And Mr. Janda or Dr. Janda, I don't know what exactly the title is from back in the day, but he really made a huge discovery with this, that if you work on, shortening those lengthened muscles and lengthening the shortened muscles, you can get your body back into alignment and allow that, especially the shoulder blade, to move functionally along the back. Yeah, this one meant a lot to me. We have the same thing in the hip, and I talk about that relationship in the hip in my hip presentation that I'm going to do in a couple weeks, so you can always look for that. Same type of relationship. So exercise. I've already kind of talked about one of the biggest muscles that we can start to pay attention to are the rhomboids. And I'm going to read this. This is from KenHub, which is a website, KENHUB. The rhomboids contribute to maintaining the posture of the thoracic and cervical regions of the back and contribute to the stability of the shoulder. Because of this, their clinical impact reflects to the upper body posture and shoulder mechanics. And basically what they're saying is pay attention to your rhomboids. Make sure you exercise your rhomboids. Make sure that you're aware of where your shoulder blades are. How are you standing? You can see in this picture, there's a really good picture of that muscle levator scapula that goes from the very top round part of our scapula up to the very, very top of our cervical spine, right, to our skull. And what happens when that head falls forward is that levator scapula gets very, very lengthened, right? It just is not able to hold the head back like it's supposed to. So we need to work our rhomboids. They do a ton of stuff. How do you work your rhomboids? Well, one, stay in a good posture, right? That's going to help. That's going to help. But anytime we can pull those shoulder blades together, that scapular retraction, right? So you could do this just standing here, pulling your shoulder blades together. You can lay prone or face down on the ground with your hands on the ground and then try to lift your hands off the ground by pulling those shoulder blades together. You can stand up maybe against a wall, pull your shoulder blades down as you reach your arms up overhead, and then bring them back down. So really working the stability of the scapula, keeping that scapula depressed while you let your arms go up overhead. And then, of course, you can do a row, and that's the picture on the right-hand side. Most of you know the row, right? We do this. We do this in a lot of classes. It's a staple exercise. And that's just, again, scapular retraction, pulling those shoulder blades together by pulling the elbows back. Most people, when they do the row, they're focused on the weights. And what I want you to be focused on is why are your shoulder blades moving together while you pull those weights towards your body? Put the focus not just in your biceps and bending your elbow, put them in your back. Make sure those shoulder blades are coming together. Here's talked about that length tension relationship. I think this was supposed to be on the other side of that last slide. But again, talking about that length tension relationship, when we're doing rows and when we're doing scapular retraction, all we're doing is getting that lengthened rhomboid, that lengthened levator scapula that has no contracting power, and giving it back, right? We're contracting it so that we're strengthening those muscles, and in a sense, we're shortening them. But while we do that, we also need to lengthen our chest muscles, right? Because if we don't lengthen our chest muscles, then we want to lengthen the chest muscles so that those rhomboids have more movement in their contraction. If that chest is super tight, then that rhomboid's having to work against a really, really tight muscle. So we want to help those rhomboids out by lengthening our chest muscles. And the best way to do that is to stretch, right? You can stretch by just opening your arms. You can stretch by standing in the Superman stance. You can stretch by standing in a doorway and letting your arms go back. Of course, you don't want any pain on that. We need to stretch our chest. Most people work their chest, but they don't stretch it. So when you come to me as a client, I almost always do more back exercises and more chest stretching exercises rather than more chest exercises and more back stretches. I want to strengthen that back and I want to lengthen your chest. So stretch your chest. And again, posture. Posture is a great way to affect this for those of you who are like, I'm not exercising. Okay, focus on your posture then. So again, kind of to review ways to keep your shoulders healthy, always practice the neutral spine or the good posture. I say be obsessed with it. I mean it, right? Start with that minute every hour, go to 2 minutes, go to 3 minutes, get it to where all of a sudden sitting and standing and with a neutral spine is not a big deal because your muscles have adapted. It makes sense to them to sit up tall. It's no longer a chore. And there's videos on YouTube. They're called posture checks on the Aging and Adult Services YouTube channel that I've done. They're like 2 or 3 minute long videos. And basically, you stand or you sit and you act as if you're pulling a string out the crown of your head. So you're lengthening your spine as far as you can up towards the ceiling. But you pull your chin in so your ears are over your shoulders. Don't let your head fall forward like many of us do. And don't lift your chin up. That's not the way we get tall. We get tall through the crown of our head. And then lift your chest, right? Let your arms hang naturally, and we're not thinking about pulling the shoulder blades together. We want to think about lifting the sternum up, and then pull your belly in. When we lift our chest, we almost always arch our low back. Pull that belly in so you have a nice neutral lumbar spine. We want to keep the hips neutral. So if you imagine your hip, that pelvis area, if it's filled with water, if you tip it forward, all that water is going to fall at the front. If you kind of tuck your hips, the water is going to fall back. We want to be in that nice neutral position. It might take you a while to figure out where that is. If you're standing, you want to keep those knees soft. Don't hyperextend them. A lot of people hyperextend and don't even know that they're doing it. That means over extending at the knee. You want it to be soft. And then try to have your toes pointed forward. When you stand, or your toes pointed out, right? Your pinky toes, going off to the side. Try to get those pinky toes to where they face forward. Again, if you've stood in a certain posture for your whole life, it's not going to change overnight. It takes a while, but it's not going to change if you practice it. That's for sure. And again, videos on YouTube if you need them. So exercises to perform at least twice a week, rows, right? Some sort of scapular retraction. That can be laying on the ground, pulling the shoulder blades together, taking a weight, pulling the shoulder blades together with your row. But again, focus on scapular retraction, not just on bending at the elbows and working your biceps. Overhead pull, same idea. Whether it's taking, lat pull, you should bring a bar, pull it down to the chest. You can do it with a band. Grabbing the band between your hands and pulling the band apart, letting the band touch you on right below your collarbones. The overhead press, practicing that overhead press, but keeping the shoulder blades stable while you do this, making sure you're not shrugging your shoulders. Just letting those arms go up without shrugging the shoulders. And then chest press. Again, what we want to really be focused on is stretching the chest, not strengthening the chest. But at the same time, that shortened chest muscle needs to be strengthened as well. Just because it's tight doesn't mean it's strong. So a chest press is going to be push-ups, laying on your back and pressing up towards the ceiling. That's about it. And remember, you can do push-ups straight on the ground, or you can do them at an angle on like your countertop, or more vertical up against the wall. Stretch too. Remember, stretch that chest. In your daily activity, have a neutral spine. When you're exercising, try to do it with your neutral posture. When you're walking with a friend, what posture are you in? When you're walking by yourself, what posture are you in? Right? Again, did I say be obsessed with posture? And of course, if you want to be healthy, maintain a healthy diet, and try to get good sleep. Those two go hand in hand with exercise and with health. Plug in for and healthy diet. These recommendations are for people. I'm not specifically prescribing anything to anybody who's watching this. I'm just giving you an idea of why our shoulders become locked, why they become less mobile, why there's pain, is because it's easy for them to become injured. And unless you really understand what's going on in there, it's going to be really hard to fix it. I highly recommend going to a physical therapist if you have shoulder. Not necessarily a medical doctor. If you have a trauma, obviously, the medical doctor. But if you're having pain or lack of range of motion, try to get into a physical therapist. They're going to be a great resource for you. All right, you all. Well, that is the shoulder health webinar. If you have any other questions, you can always get in touch with me. My email at the county is pcorley@slco.org, O-R-G, pcorley@slc.org. I invite your questions. They're always good. They make me think, and I will definitely get back with you with any questions that are sent my way. Thanks for joining me today. Have a great day.